G'day all, Adam Wuiske here from Wuiske Models again. So this is going to be kind of our first video tour and all the rest of that about the layout room and the shed and everything else. But in this one in particular, I want to talk about sheds. So let's talk sheds. So, just to give you a brief rundown of this shed, it's a standard shed. The thing is this shed here is 30 metres long, so near enough to 100 feet, and it's 12 metres wide, so near enough to 40 feet, give or take. Now, what we've done is we essentially just got on the shed builders. This wasn't the plan of what we were going to build. The initial plan was to go 30 metres by 12, same size, but we wanted to go 5.4 metres high so that we could make it 2 stories. Now, the problem is, the minute you go that high, you start running into issues with council, you start running into issues with just the quantity of materials you need, and your concrete slab needs to be twice as thick. So, all of it adds up to more money out of your pocket. The bottom line is this shed, the kit for this, cost us $36,000. That was it. Now, what few of the things we did to save some money was, first of all, every time you talk to a shed builder, the first thing they ask is, how many roller doors do you want? Well, in our case, none. And most times when you say that to a shed builder, they tend to raise their eyebrows and scratch their head a bit and say things like, are you sure? Which, yes, we are sure. We just want to play trains. So when you take a roller door out of a shed, for each roller door you take out, the bill drops by about $2,000. So in this shed, the standard design came with 6 roller doors. So you do the maths. We saved a bit of money. So this shed here, as I said, it was 36 for the kit, and we went in with 2.7 metres high at the eaves. Now the reason we did that is because when you get to sheds this size, they're usually machinery sheds or farming sheds, and the minimum height traditionally is 3.5 metres. Okay? We don't need that. So, as I said, the initial plan was 5.4, with the top level being for the layout, and the bottom level being for production for our factory, and for the shop and the office. The problem was the kit for that was $140,000, purely and simply because all the portals needed to be bigger, the concrete slab needed to be twice as thick, but we haven't even touched slabs yet, and all the steel to create the subfloor for the second level. So 140 grand down to 36. It's not a bad saving. So it's actually cheaper for us to build 2 of these side by side than to build 1 going vertically. So the idea of what we did was, effectively, we wanted the maximum amount of size, we didn't want any wasted space, and we didn't want to be paying for things that didn't serve any purpose. So if you're talking to a shed builder, don't be afraid to change things. You'd be surprised at the results. So from there, once we got the shed, as I've said, $36,000 for the kit. The concrete slab underneath the shed cost us another $28,000, which we thought was pretty good based on the quotes and the expected prices we had. And then from there, it was actually only about $9,000 to erect it. And then we had an electrician came in, installed a power pole about 20 metres that way, and he put in 36 double power points all around the room. So all of that ended up costing us about $6,500 for that. So realistically, we came out with this shed was around $110,000 for the whole lot once we did everything, which me personally, I think's a bargain because we've got a 360 square metre shed that we can play trains in. And if you're talking in Imperial, that's 4,000 square feet, which is not bad. Speaking about the quantity and sizes of everything stupid with this shed, as I say, the layout that Insanity built, underneath this slab we have crusher dust. Everyone does. It's a normal thing. The sub-base. Ours, we used genuine Queensland Rail ballast, which sounds really cool, but it's actually just serendipitous and completely accidental because 30 kilometres from here is the Maloo Ballast Quarry, which is also where everyone gets their crusher dust from in this area. Now, for the size of this shed, we needed 2 40-foot side tippers, and we discovered that our block is big enough that you can turn an actual road train around on it without a hassle. Okay, so the next step from there is once we had this big tin can, we needed to start making it habitable. Now, effectively, we've got a bad situation with the weather in this place. In the middle of summer, it hits 45 degrees here, and in winter, well, 2 weeks ago, it hit -9. So if you're working in Fahrenheit, you do the math because it breaks my brain and I end up dividing by 0. So there's a massive temperature variation in this place. Now, based on my previous experience with other large layouts, we've had big problems with movement. When we were in our last place in Jandowie, when we had 2 very large layouts there, we had 300 metres of black soil beneath the property. So everything moved, and it was a constant problem chasing bubbles in track work and everything else. You could build a straight line, but it wouldn't be straight within a fortnight. So obviously, with all of that in mind, the biggest things to worry about here are things like moisture, humidity, temperature variation, okay, and therefore insulation. What we've found is that the conventional methods are expensive. They're very, very expensive when you start getting to this sort of size, and they're a pain in the backside. So the normal method of lining a shed is you build a stud wall out of this stuff, 70x35 studding material, right? And then you put plasterboard or gyprock or whatever you want to call it on there. Now, personally, I hate plasterboard. I hate it with a passion, right? I would genuinely look forward to the day we can hunt and kill the manufacturers of plasterboard for sport. That's how much it annoys me. I hate working with it. So, a suggestion was made to us by one of the guys who was working on the shed, where he suggested using yellow tongue. Now, if you're not familiar with yellow tongue, it's the primary material that's used, especially here in Australia, for making flooring in new houses, especially on steel frames. So we had some of it from our house that's being built up on the hill. We had some of it left over and we did some experiments. Now, I can tell you now that yellow tongue is apparently more waterproof or water resistant than plywood or MDF. So that's great. In theory, it works. Also, it's 19 millimeters thick. When we were lining the walls of our shed, we just went with the idea of using yellow tongue. What's the worst that could happen? First of all, by avoiding a stud wall, it meant we didn't actually reduce the width of the shed. That's not a bad idea. We're making a model train layout. We don't want to encroach on that space because they're never big enough. So, with the yellow tongue, this is the stuff here, right? As you can see, it's got a yellow tongue and a little slot. It's effectively like a decent form of chipboard, but it's highly compacted. It is actually quite good for putting in water because we got a piece and we stuck it in a bucket of water for a month. No problem. Now, with that, all we've done is it comes in 3.6 metre by 800 millimetre lengths. We just bought a bucket load of it, and I mean a bucket load of it. And we just cut it to 2.7 metres and we ran it around the walls. Now, by doing that, we could screw it with steel screws straight into the girts running horizontally along the shed, and we could stuff that with 4.0 rated insulating bats, earth wall bats to be exact. Now, by going that way, it worked out that it was half the price of what it would have cost us to do with plasterboard, and it means that we can mount things off this wall without ever needing to look for a stud. So, for those that have their set ways of doing it, this may not be the right way, but it works for us. And it seemed to be the best option for what we wanted. So as well as that, the cost. So these days you're looking at a sheet of plasterboard is around about $22 for an 8-foot by 4-foot sheet. A sheet of plywood, which I've seen people line their sheds with plywood. Plywood's up, floating give or take, either side of $100 at the moment because the world's gone crazy with pricing. So either way, you're up for a lot of money, especially when you've got this much of it to do. With this stuff, the yellow tongue was $51 a sheet, and that's even after it had a 50% price increase due to COVID. And from there, we've had literally 3 piles that are over 6 foot high of offcuts, which we can use for the shelving under the layout. Okay, so the next step was to do the ceiling, which we still haven't actually completed. Well, not totally. So the first step was to put in your standard top hat bearers, okay? To be honest, you can buy them anywhere. They're not very expensive unless you need a stupid quantity. And I actually found them on Facebook Marketplace. I found a wholesaler that deals with the public. I rang him up and he was very professional until I told him how many we needed. And then he said words I can't say on here. And then he offered us a great deal. I think it was about $11 each or something. Sorry, it was $9 each. The normal price is $11 each. and we bought 250 6.3 metre lengths. So with that, we went in and we cut them down to about 6.15 metres in length, and we had to put 136 in this ceiling. This is just for the layout room, so 24 metres out of 30. So there's 136, there's 10 batten screws in each one, so you do the math, it's 1,360 screws, which sounds insane, but it's a lot less insane when you have a willing 15-year-old that you can throw up a ladder, because he's a hell of a lot more nimble and agile than I am, and he can just go in and do all of his monkey routine and lean in all sorts of weird angles that just make me want to cringe. So the next step after once they were in, which managed to get done actually in about 3 days solid work, was to get the insulating bats in, which they're all in now, just in this room, and we went through 256 bats. So that was actually put in 48 hours. So the next step beyond this is that we need to actually sheet the ceiling. Now, there's a lot of different options. We've had people telling us, oh, you need to have a suspended ceiling. No, we don't, and I'll tell you why. A suspended ceiling is a great idea, and we came very close to actually doing it. The only problem was this room is huge. It's filled with model train layout, and the aisleways are very long. If you start putting in a suspended ceiling at 2.4 metres, it feels insanely claustrophobic. It makes this room get very small and very crowded very quickly. So by just leaving it as a raked ceiling, it actually feels a lot more open and a lot less oppressive. So the plan we've got for our ceiling, as I said, we've got the bats in, we've got the top hats in, is that we needed a material that was light. We also needed a material that wouldn't trap mold or create mold by trapping condensation and moisture and things of that nature. So the idea that was put to us that we thought we're going to have a crack at this was to use core flute. Now, if you're not familiar with core flute, think of your real estate signs that you see on the side of the road. They're literally 2 thin sheets of ABS styrene with a ribbed fluting in the middle. Very light and very breezy. So also, most importantly, when you're dealing with this size, very cheap. So the plan is that we're going to be screwing core flute straight to the battens. So once the core fluting goes in, it's going to be painted a nice pastel shade of black. Partially because I like black. Secondly, because we don't want to pay attention to the ceiling. The plan is that we'll have a fascia on the front of the layout. We'll have a headboard with all the lighting. And then we don't want you to pay attention to anything else. The idea is what we're trying to create is a situation where you feel like you're standing in a room looking out a window. Now, when you're looking out a window, how much do you pay attention to the wall above and beyond and below the window? You don't. That's what we're trying to create. We started doing it on the last layout that we had in Jandowie, and it worked a treat. A lot of people commented to us that it feels like you're immersing yourself in a world, which is exactly what we're going for. So these are the reasons why we've done the things that we've done, and there's a lot more to it as well. But the bottom line is cost is a big factor once you start getting to this size, because even products that are cheap become very expensive when you need copious quantities of them. As for instance, to use the core flute sheeting for our ceiling, we need 170 sheets. It's a little bit. But the next chapter, hopefully, we'll start heading onto the bench work, why we've done it the way we've done it, the costs involved in doing it, and some of the things we've done right, some of the things we've done wrong, and you guys can tell me where I've gone completely wrong on everything. So, as always, we shall see how we go. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. If you think I'm just some dopey bugger that's just talking a load of crap, feel free to do the same. But we shall see how we go, and we'll catch you next time. So just one final bit I probably should add is apologies for the shakiness of the camera. Okay, we haven't actually employed some sectogenarian that's out of work and trying to escape from the old folks' home. Right, what we've actually done is we've utilised the wonderful technology that is having a 15-year-old urchin, and he's been operating the camera and shaking like all buggery. So as a result, we were looking at tripods and robots and things like that, but it turns out they've got a better union. So rightio, this one here, well, we feed him, so he kind of does the job. Anyway, I'm sorry about the shakiness, but we'll catch you next time.